The sun had just begun its slow descent, casting a warm, golden glow over the fields, but the air carried a chill that made the hair on the back of his neck rise. He had been riding along the worn path for hours, the creak of leather and the steady rhythm of his horses' hooves the only sounds to break the silence. The farmstead had grown distant behind him, and the land ahead stretched wild and empty, dotted with shadows that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking. He had expected an ordinary ride, nothing more than a quiet evening among the pastures, but the sight that greeted him changed everything. In a small clearing, partially hidden by overgrown weeds and the dying light, lay a mare. She was old, her coat matted and damp with sweat, her breathing shallow and uneven. Wrapped tightly around her body was a faded quilt, frayed at the edges and stained with mud. Something about the way she shivered beneath the fabric made his chest tighten. He dismounted immediately, moving cautiously toward her, boots sinking into the soft earth as he leaned close to study her condition. She was alive, just barely, and the quiet desperation in her eyes tugged at a part of him he didn't often show to anyone. Tucked beneath the quilt, pinned with a small wooden clip, was a note. His fingers trembled slightly as he unfolded it, reading the hurried scrawl that spoke of urgency and fear. The words were brief but chilling. Someone else was in danger. No name, no explanation, just the stark warning and the implication that time was running short. He looked up at the mare, her head nodding slightly against the ground, as if she understood the importance of the message she carried. The moment felt impossibly heavy, as if the air itself had thickened with concern, and the weight of a secret someone had left in haste. The man glanced around the clearing, eyes scanning the dimming horizon. There were no footprints except his own, no sign of a struggle, nothing to hint at where the note had come from or who might have left the mare in such a fragile state. The quilt had been wrapped with care, despite the dirt and wear, suggesting someone had tried to protect her, to shield her from the cold and the danger of the night. Yet the urgency of the message left no room for comfort. The mare was a living warning, and he felt it deep in his bones. Someone needed help, and it might be far worse than he could imagine. He knelt beside the mare, pressing his palm to her side to feel the faint, uneven beat of her heart. She winced slightly but remained still, as if trusting him despite her exhaustion. His mind raced. Who could have left her here? And more importantly, who was in danger? The thought of leaving her to collapse alone was unbearable, but the warning was impossible to ignore. The land around him was empty, quiet, but it held the sense of urgency, of unseen eyes watching, of time slipping away with every passing second. Carefully he unwrapped the quilt, revealing more of the mare's frailty. Her legs trembled beneath her, and small cuts along her flank hinted at a recent struggle or escape. Yet beneath the weakness he saw determination in her eyes, a stubborn life force refusing to give in. He murmured soft words, gentle enough to soothe her, yet firm enough to encourage her to stand. Slowly, with effort, she rose, legs shaking but steadying beneath her weight. She nuzzled his shoulder once, as if acknowledging their shared understanding. The note still lay in his hand, trembling as the wind picked up around them, rustling through the dry grass. He read it again, searching for any hint, any clue, but it remained stark and foreboding. Someone else was in danger. There was no indication of who, where, or what the threat was, only a plea that demanded immediate action. He felt a knot of tension tighten in his chest, knowing that ignoring it could have consequences beyond what he could foresee. The mare had brought him a message, but delivering it or acting on it would require courage, insight, and the willingness to step into uncertainty. He looked into the mare's eyes, reading the unspoken urgency. She was not just a wounded animal. She was a messenger, a bridge between the danger that lay ahead and the person who might be able to intervene. Every instinct told him that the next steps were critical. Leaving her to recover alone was impossible, yet taking her with him was risky. The terrain was unforgiving and the night was approaching fast. Yet something about the way she shifted her weight, the subtle stamping of her hooves in the dirt, conveyed a sense of purpose, as if she knew where they needed to go, or at least that she needed him to follow. He reached for the reins, adjusting the saddle and bracing himself for the journey ahead. Every movement of the mare seemed deliberate, each shuffle of her hooves carrying him closer to the unknown. The clearing, once quiet and seemingly safe, now felt charged with suspense, each shadow and rustle of grass hinting at the dangers to come. The man's thoughts turned to the message again, turning over possibilities in his mind. Who was in danger? What threat could be so urgent that someone would leave a wounded animal as the only warning? The sky darkened quickly, the last light slipping behind the distant hills. He led the mare toward the path that wound through the trees, her steps slow but steady, eyes bright with determination despite her weakness. Every sense was alert, the wind carrying distant sounds that might have been animals or something else entirely. He could feel the weight of the unknown pressing on him, the tension of responsibility, the knowledge that someone's life might depend on the actions he took next. As he moved, he noticed faint signs in the earth, broken branches, displaced stones, a trail that suggested someone or something had passed through recently. The mare's ears twitched at every sound, her body tense yet willing, guiding him as much as he guided her. It became clear that she knew more than she could express, and that he had to trust her instincts as much as his own. The night was approaching, bringing darkness and uncertainty, yet leaving the mare behind was not an option. The note burned in his pocket like a silent command, a reminder that time was running out. He thought of the people he knew, of friends and neighbors, of anyone who could be in danger, but the urgency in the mare's eyes told him that this was not a matter of chance. Someone was in trouble, and they needed help before it was too late. Every step forward felt heavy with suspense, each rustle of grass or distant cry magnifying the tension that had begun the moment he discovered the mare. He paused for a moment, looking back at the clearing one last time. The quilt, now crumpled and abandoned on the ground, seemed almost like a symbol of what had been left behind, a message, a warning, and a life entrusted to him. The mare shifted, nudging his shoulder softly, urging him to continue. He knew that he could not turn back, that the journey ahead was uncertain and fraught with danger. The note was clear, though its words were few. Someone else was in danger. And with that knowledge came a responsibility he could not ignore. The wind carried a faint sound of movement in the distance, subtle but deliberate. The man's hand went to the reins, his pulse quickening. The mare's ears twitched, and her gaze fixed on the same direction, muscles tensing as if sensing what lay ahead. They were stepping into the unknown, guided by instinct and urgency, bound together by the weight of a secret that could not be ignored. The path ahead was dark, uncertain, and fraught with unseen hazards, but turning away was not an option. Every step forward brought more questions than answers. Who had left the mare? Why was someone else in danger? How had the mare survived long enough to deliver the message? Each thought pressed heavily on his mind, yet the urgency in her movements left no room for hesitation. The clearing faded behind them, the horizon darkening, and the first stars began to appear, faint pinpricks of light in a sky that promised long shadows and difficult choices. As they disappeared into the trees, the tension hung like a living thing around them, the mare moving with purpose despite her frailty, and the man's resolve hardening with each step. He carried the note close to his heart, feeling its weight and its warning, understanding that every action now could tip the balance between safety and disaster. Somewhere ahead, someone's life depended on him, and the mare had brought him the only clue, a silent plea wrapped in a quilt, a dying animal whose courage was greater than most living beings he had ever known. The path narrowed, and shadows grew deeper, the forest closing around them. He tightened his grip on the reins, senses alert, every instinct heightened by the stakes that lay ahead. The mare's breathing was uneven but steady, and her eyes held a wisdom that seemed almost human, a silent understanding that danger was real and that help must come soon. The note, simple and urgent, whispered in his mind, someone else was in danger. And with that, the clearing, the quilt, and the mystery faded behind them, leaving only the journey ahead, the unknown that stretched into darkness, and the urgency that would drive every step forward. The forest pressed in around them, the shadows stretching like long fingers across the narrow trail. The man guided the mare carefully, feeling her weight beneath him, noting the tremor in her legs that spoke of exhaustion and pain. Every snap of a twig beneath his boots made him flinch, alert to the possibility of danger lurking unseen. He had grown up with horses, had ridden through many rough patches of land and weather, But there was something different about tonight. The urgency that had started in the clearing with the quilt and the note now hung in the air like a living presence, pressing on him with every step. The mare's breathing was ragged but steady, and she moved forward with surprising determination for her weakened state. He reached down occasionally, murmuring encouragement, pressing a hand to her side to reassure her that he was with her. The note burned in his pocket, its message brief but clear. Someone else was in danger. There had been no clues, no names, nothing that hinted at where he was supposed to go or what he might find, and yet he felt certain that the path ahead, guided by the mare, was the only way to act. As they pushed deeper into the trees, the terrain became rougher, roots twisting across the path and low branches scraping at his arms. The mare's hooves slipped once or twice, but she corrected herself quickly, leaning into his guidance, as if she trusted him as much as he trusted her. He couldn't help but glance at her, marveling at her resilience. She had been abandoned, left to die in a clearing with only a quilt to protect her, yet here she was, carrying him toward an unknown danger. Something about her eyes told him that she had a purpose beyond survival, that she had been left for him to find for a reason he didn't yet understand. The sky overhead darkened, and a chill wind swept through the trees, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and distant smoke. He tightened his cloak around his shoulders, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. There was a stillness to the forest, a deceptive calm that made him uneasy. He had learned over the years that danger often hid in silence, and the note's warning had already proven that threats were real and urgent. Each step forward felt like a test, both for him and for the mare. Memories of the morning's ride came back to him, the creak of his horse's saddle, the empty farmstead behind him, the sense of peace he had expected before the discovery. That peace was gone now, replaced with a steady, prickling tension. He thought about the quilt, frayed and worn, and the care with which it had been wrapped around the mare. Whoever had left it must have been desperate, forced to leave her behind in order to send a warning. And the message itself, so brief, so cryptic, made him uneasy. Someone else was in danger, but how much time did they have? Was it minutes, hours, or longer? The mare shifted beneath him, her ears flicking toward a distant rustle. He froze, listening. The sound was faint, almost imperceptible, but enough to put his senses on alert. The forest seemed alive with small movements, a branch snapping, leaves skittering across the ground, the distant cry of an animal disturbed from its rest. Each sound added to the tension, a reminder that the world around them was unpredictable and potentially threatening. He murmured to the mare, guiding her toward the safer center of the path, trusting that her instincts would complement his own. As they moved, his mind wandered to the people he knew in the region, farmers, ranchers, neighbors who could be in danger. He tried to imagine scenarios, a child lost in the woods, someone trapped or hurt, a criminal threat lurking somewhere along the path. The possibilities were endless, yet the urgency of the mare's message left him no time to linger on speculation. He had to act, and he had to act quickly, trusting both her instincts and his own judgment to guide them through the night. The trees began to thin slightly, revealing a sloped area ahead. He slowed the mare, letting her steady herself against the uneven ground. Her sides heaved, and he could feel the tremor in her legs as she shifted her weight. He pressed a hand to her neck, murmuring soft words, reminding her to trust him as much as he trusted her. Each moment of hesitation, each pause along the path increased the tension. He knew they were moving closer to something, though he had no idea what awaited them at the end of the trail. The wind shifted again, carrying a faint scent of smoke, and his pulse quickened. It was distant, almost imperceptible, yet distinct enough to suggest human presence. He thought of the note, the quilt, and the mare's determination, and he realized that whatever awaited them ahead might be more dangerous than he had imagined. The urgency was no longer theoretical, it was tangible, pressing him forward with every careful step along the narrow path. He glanced down at the mare. She had been through so much, yet her resolve did not waver. Each step was careful, deliberate, and yet purposeful. It was clear she had been trained to endure, or perhaps it was her instinct that guided her, a combination of strength and stubborn will that refused to give in. The note had said someone else was in danger, but the mare herself seemed to carry a message beyond words, survival, courage, and the necessity to act. Night had fully fallen now, the sky a deep indigo dotted with stars. Shadows stretched and shifted across the uneven trail, and the forest seemed to close in, making every step forward feel heavier, more critical. He tightened his grip on the reins, feeling the mare respond to his guidance, her hooves slipping occasionally but never faltering completely. Each movement brought them closer to an unknown fate, yet he could not turn back. The urgency had settled over him like a cloak, impossible to ignore, a weight that pressed on his chest with every step. The path curved sharply, revealing a small ridge ahead. From this vantage point he could see a faint light flickering in the distance. It was small, weak, but unmistakable, a lantern, perhaps, or a candle inside a cabin. His heart quickened. Whoever the note had warned about might be near that light. He urged the mare forward gently, careful not to overexert her, letting her instincts guide them as much as his own experience did. Each step felt critical, each breath measured against the pounding of his pulse. As they descended toward the ridge, the sounds of the forest shifted. A distant cry, low and urgent, carried across the clearing. It was human, unmistakably so, though muffled and tinged with fear. The mare pricked her ears, stamping her front hoof lightly, signaling her awareness of the sound. He leaned close to her, whispering reassurances, letting her know they were coming. The note's warning, the quilt, and the mare's determination had led him here, and now he understood that action could not wait any longer. The light ahead flickered again, casting a faint glow across the trees. The sound grew slightly louder, more distinct, and he realized the person in danger was likely very near. He slowed the mare, careful to move quietly, to avoid startling the unknown figure. The forest seemed to hold its breath with them, shadows shifting, leaves rustling, the faint cry echoing through the darkness. The sense of suspense, of anticipation, was almost unbearable, each moment a reminder of how fragile the situation had become. The mare nudged him lightly, as if urging him to continue, to trust her instincts. He pressed forward, every nerve on edge, every sense alert. The note, brief and urgent, had brought him this far, but it was the mare's guidance, her understanding, and her strength that would carry them the rest of the way. He could feel the presence of someone nearby, hear the shallow, frightened breaths carried on the wind, and he knew they were close to discovering the truth of the danger, though what form it would take remained unknown. The trees parted slightly, revealing the faint outline of a small cabin. The lantern burned weakly in the window, light flickering across the wooden walls. He dismounted carefully, leading the mare to a safer clearing near the edge of the ridge. Her breathing was heavy but steady, and she nuzzled his shoulder, a silent acknowledgment of their shared effort. He held the reins loosely, glancing toward the cabin, and the sense of suspense, of imminent confrontation, grew heavier. Whoever had been in danger was here, waiting or perhaps unaware that help had arrived. The cries had stopped, replaced by silence. He could see movement through the dim window, shadows crossing the faint glow of the lantern. The urgency of the note, the effort of the journey, and the mare's steadfast determination had brought him to the threshold of what might be a life-or-death moment. Every step forward would require courage, quick thinking, and careful observation. The mare shifted beneath him, muscles coiled but calm, ready to respond to his guidance, and he knew the moment of discovery, the true test of his resolve, was only seconds away. The tension is now fully established, the background and mystery deepened, and the scene is set for the next chapter where the danger and the unknown will be revealed. He crouched low in the shadows, the mare shifting restlessly beside him, sensing the tension in the air. The cabin ahead was quiet now, the faint glow of the lantern revealing only vague shapes behind the windows. Every instinct in him screamed that danger was close, that the warning in the quilted mare's presence was far from over. He held the reins loosely, letting her settle as he studied the scene. The clearing around the cabin was overgrown, tall grass brushing against the horse's flanks, hiding uneven ground that could easily betray any hurried movement. From his position, he could see the door was slightly ajar. The hinges creaked softly in the wind, and for a moment, the darkness beyond seemed to shift, almost like it was breathing. A sense of unease gripped him. He had expected someone to be aware of him, someone alert and frightened, but the interior appeared empty. the faint shadow moving past the window likely just a flicker of candlelight. Still, the note's warning echoed in his mind. Someone else was in danger. The uncertainty gnawed at him, but it also pushed him forward. He had to investigate, had to find the person before it was too late. He approached slowly, every footstep measured, mindful of the uneven terrain. The mare followed, careful but steady, as if reading his intent and matching it with her own. He could hear the faint sound of her breath mingling with the night wind, and it reminded him that they were partners in this, that the journey had relied as much on her instincts as on his courage. As they neared the cabin, he could make out a faint figure huddled inside, shivering and barely visible through the window. Fear prickled at the edges of his mind. Whoever they were alone and vulnerable, and time had already run too far against them. He paused outside the door, glancing back at the mare. Her ears twitched, listening to sounds he could barely perceive, and her calm presence offered a strange reassurance. Carefully, he nudged the door open further, slipping inside with the mare close behind. The interior smelled of smoke, damp wood, and the faint odor of fear. The figure crouched in the corner, wrapped in a thin blanket, eyes wide and searching the shadows for threats. The room was small, barely furnished, and the candlelight flickered across the walls, casting long, eerie shadows. "Easy," he whispered, keeping his voice low but steady. The figure flinched slightly, then froze, clearly weighing whether to flee or trust this stranger. He took another cautious step, showing his hands, and the figure's shoulders relaxed slightly. "I'm here to help," he said, glancing toward the mare, who nuzzled his side as if affirming the statement. The presence of the horse, weary but strong, seemed to lend him authority, a quiet assurance that help had arrived. The person's voice trembled when they finally spoke. "Who are you?" "Someone who wants to make sure you're safe," he replied. "But we don't have much time. Someone left a warning for me." "And it seems it was meant for you, too." Their eyes widened, a mixture of relief and terror crossing their face. You have the horse?" The mare shifted again, stamping her hoof lightly as if confirming her role in the message, in the warning, and in the urgency of the situation. He knelt slightly, keeping himself low and non-threatening, while keeping an eye on every shadow and sound in the room. "Tell me what happened," he said. "Everything. Who's in danger, and why were you left here alone?" The figure shivered but began to speak, voice hesitant at first, revealing fragments of a story. Someone pursuing them, a mistake that had drawn unwanted attention, a sense of threat that had escalated beyond their control. Each word layered tension upon tension, the sense of danger growing more immediate and real. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the cabin walls and carrying the faint sound of movement through the trees. The man's ears twitched, alert to any hint that someone might be watching, following, or approaching. He realized that the danger was not just a distant worry, but something immediate, lurking beyond the thin wooden walls. The mare shifted, muscles coiled, nostrils flaring slightly as if catching scents he could not detect. Every instinct screamed that they were not alone, that the warning had been more urgent than he had initially realized. The figure explained further, piecing together a tale of threats, mistaken actions, and the need to escape unnoticed. The tension in the room thickened with every sentence, each word a reminder that their safety was fragile. "I don't know how they found out," the person said, voice shaking. I thought I could hide it. I didn't expect them to come so close. Or so fast." The man nodded slowly, listening, absorbing every detail while calculating the best course of action. Time was slipping away, and inaction was not an option. He glanced down at the mare. She had been abandoned, left to die, and yet she had carried him here, delivered the message, and now stood ready, sensing the danger that encircled the cabin. Her eyes were steady, reflecting a quiet understanding that surpassed simple animal instinct. He felt a surge of determination. Whatever had brought them here, whatever threat lingered in the shadows, he could not allow it to harm the person who had been left behind. Every sense was heightened, each movement measured as the weight of responsibility settled upon him. The wind shifted again, stronger this time, carrying the faint but unmistakable sound of approaching footsteps. The man froze, signaling the figure to stay low. The mare's ears flicked forward, alert and tense, muscles coiled for immediate action. The footsteps grew louder, deliberate, and slow, as if the person approaching knew exactly what or whom they were looking for. The candlelight flickered violently, casting jagged shadows that danced across the walls and ceiling. The sense of suspense became almost unbearable, pressing in from every angle, the unknown danger now immediate and tangible. The figure in the corner whispered, voice trembling, "They're coming." "I can hear them." The man nodded, heart pounding, and reached for a sturdy chair to position it near the door, something to block or slow entry if needed. Every motion had to be careful, precise, nothing that might draw attention prematurely. The mare shifted, stamping her hoof lightly, as if sensing the same urgency and preparing for whatever confrontation lay ahead. The room seemed charged with a silent energy, each second stretching longer as the threat drew closer. The footsteps stopped just outside the cabin. A shadow loomed in the doorway, and the man's breath caught. He could feel the tension in every fiber of his body, muscles coiled, senses acute. The mare nickered softly, an almost human sound of warning, and the figure in the corner flinched. The intruder's silhouette was visible now, broad and deliberate, scanning the room, unaware that help had arrived, but certain of the danger within. Every instinct told him that a single wrong move could escalate the situation into chaos. He whispered to the figure, "Stay calm. We need to wait, watch, and only act when necessary." The person nodded, eyes wide, hands trembling slightly as they clutched the thin blanket tighter. Outside, the intruder moved closer, steps cautious but purposeful, as if searching for something hidden. The man's mind raced, considering every possibility, negotiation, distraction, escape. The mare shifted again, ready to respond to subtle cues, a living ally in the tension that now filled the cabin and the night. The room seemed to shrink around them, the walls pressing closer as shadows stretched. Every small sound, the creak of the floorboards, the snap of a twig outside, the distant hoot of an owl heightened the suspense. The figure whispered fragments of backstory, revealing motives, dangers, and missteps that had led to this moment. The man absorbed every detail, weighing options, knowing that the next actions could decide whether the danger ended or escalated. The mare's breathing was steady now, muscles taut, yet she exuded an aura of calm authority that bolstered his courage. The intruder paused at the doorway, and for a heartbeat everything hung in balance. Outside, the night air was still, carrying the faint rustle of leaves and distant sounds of the forest. Inside, the small room seemed suspended in time, the candlelight flickering, shadows stretching, and tension thick enough to touch. The man's hand rested lightly on the mare's neck, feeling her energy, sensing the bond that had carried them from the clearing to this critical point. And then, just as suddenly as it had stopped, the shadow moved again, deeper into the cabin, eyes scanning every corner, unaware that the person in danger was no longer defenseless. The mare shifted, nudging him gently, ready for what might come next. He whispered a reminder to the figure to stay quiet, while every nerve in his body braced for the confrontation that was inevitable. The danger, the warning, the urgency, they were no longer abstract. They were here in the room, pressing in from every direction, and the outcome was uncertain. The main conflict is now fully explored, with suspense intensified, the subplots revealed, and the stakes high, while the tension remains unresolved. The cabin seemed to hold its breath as the intruder's shadow stretched across the worn wooden floor, light from the flickering candle casting jagged, uncertain shapes on the walls. The man pressed the mare's side gently with his hand, feeling the steady tension in her muscles, sensing her readiness to move at a moment's notice. Every sound carried weight, the soft shift of the blanket as the figure in the corner moved, the intruder's cautious footsteps, the distant cry of an animal in the night. Time seemed to slow, each heartbeat echoing in the stillness, the suspense tightening with every passing second. He adjusted his position slightly, staying low and partially hidden behind the mare, using her presence as both shield and reassurance. The mare nickered softly, a sound that seemed almost deliberate, a signal that danger was near and that they were connected in understanding the urgency of the situation. The intruder paused again, eyes scanning the room, sensing something unseen, something waiting in the shadows. The man's pulse quickened. Every instinct told him that a single misstep could ignite the confrontation, and yet inaction was impossible. The person in the corner shivered, whispering fragments of fear. They know someone saw them. They won't leave until they're certain. The man nodded slightly, his gaze fixed on the doorway. He could see the subtle shift of the intruder's stance, the way one hand hovered near what might be a weapon, the other brushing along the doorframe as if testing the terrain. The tension in the room was electric, as if every breath and movement carried the potential to tip the balance into chaos. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying shadows that seemed to move with intent. The intruder's footfalls grew louder, deliberate, and methodical. The man realized they were being watched, assessed, and he had to anticipate every action, every potential threat. He whispered softly to the figure, "Stay still, trust me. They won't see us unless we give them reason." The mare stamped her hoof lightly, shifting her weight, muscles coiled in readiness, reflecting the same urgency he felt in his chest. The intruder's hand moved toward the door, and the man's mind raced, considering every option: block the entry, create a distraction, or strike first. But the mare's presence offered a silent reminder: patience and timing were just as powerful as force. One wrong move could put the person in the corner in immediate danger. The flicker of candlelight painted their faces in sharp contrast, illuminating the fear and determination etched into each expression. A sudden noise outside, a branch snapping under unseen weight, made them all freeze. The intruder stiffened, eyes darting toward the window, muscles tensing, ready to react. The man pressed a calming hand against the mare's neck, feeling her steady breaths, grounding himself. The room seemed to shrink further, each second stretching into what felt like hours, as anticipation thickened the air. Every shadow could hide a threat, every sound a warning. The figure in the corner leaned slightly forward, voice trembling. They're looking for me. I think they know someone came." The man's jaw tightened. "We have to be ready." "They're testing, seeing if anyone's moved or reacted." The mare shifted, ears flicking toward the doorway, a low nicker vibrating in her chest. Her instincts were sharp, honed by survival, and the man trusted them as much as his own judgment. Outside, the wind carried a whisper of sound, almost imperceptible, but enough to hint that the intruder had noticed something. His pulse raced. The flickering candlelight cast shadows that moved like specters across the walls, creating an illusion of multiple figures, adding to the tension. He leaned closer to the person in the corner. "Stay calm, don't make a sound. We only act when necessary. Trust me." Their eyes widened, fear and hope mingling, reflecting the intensity of the moment. The intruder's steps shifted, deliberate, closer, searching, testing the room. The man could feel every instinct screaming, every nerve taut. The mare's muscles tensed beneath him, each breath controlled, each movement calculated. Time stretched, the world narrowing down to the small, fragile room, the single light, the shadow in the doorway, and the fragile balance between survival and exposure. The man's thoughts flickered back to the quilt and the note, to the mare's struggle to survive and deliver a warning. Everything had led to this moment, and yet the danger was more immediate and real than he could have imagined. The intruder's hand rested briefly on the doorframe, fingers brushing the edge, before pulling back slightly, uncertain. That pause was all the space he needed to calculate the next move, to prepare for whatever escalation might come next. A sudden creak of the floorboards, faint but deliberate, made the figure in the corner flinch. The intruder froze, head cocked as if listening for the source. The man held his breath, feeling the tension radiate through the mare, muscles coiled like springs ready to release. Each second was drawn out, each heartbeat echoing in the quiet, the anticipation of confrontation growing unbearable. He whispered again, low and steady, "Wait for it. We move when we have to, not before." The mare shifted, pressing close to him, her body radiating calm and readiness simultaneously. The intruder moved slightly, testing, searching, unaware that they were being watched and that the room now held a silent, vigilant presence prepared to act at the perfect moment. The wind outside rose suddenly, rattling the window, and the intruder's shadow danced across the walls with unexpected intensity. He could see the figure tense, fingers brushing something at their side, possibly a weapon. The man's pulse thumped loudly in his ears. He glanced at the mare, and she met his gaze, understanding as if reading the unspoken command: patience, precision, and readiness. The suspense had reached a point where every movement mattered, where a single mistake could ignite immediate danger. The figure in the corner shifted slightly, trying to make themselves smaller, more hidden, eyes wide and fixed on the intruder. "I don't think—" "They know I'm here," they whispered, voice trembling. The man shook his head ever so slightly. "They know, they're just testing, waiting. We need to wait too. Until the moment is right." The mare shifted her weight, ears flicking toward a distant sound, another signal that the world outside the cabin was not as still as it seemed. Outside, the intruder's hand brushed the doorframe again. The candlelight flickered violently, shadows dancing and stretching across the walls, creating an almost surreal tension in the room. The man pressed his palm against the mare's neck, feeling the energy in her body, the coiled power of patience and instinct. Every sense was alert, every nerve taut with anticipation. The moment of confrontation was nearing, yet still uncertain, and the stakes had never felt higher. A faint sound, almost too quiet to notice, came from the window. The intruder paused, head turning slightly, tension radiating from their posture. The man adjusted slightly, staying low, whispering a reminder to the figure in the corner to remain still. The mare shifted subtly, her presence both shield and warning, ready to react at the first sign of threat. The tension in the cabin was unbearable, each second stretching, each movement charged with suspense. He realized that the intruder was searching not just for the person in the corner, but for any sign of interference, any hint that help had arrived. The note, the mare, the quilt all had been part of a chain of events leading to this precise moment, and yet nothing had revealed the full scope of danger. The intruder's awareness was growing, senses testing, and the moment for decisive action loomed ever closer. The wind rattled the cabin once more, and a faint rustle from the outside indicated movement approaching rapidly. The intruder stiffened, eyes narrowing, muscles coiled as if ready to strike. The man felt the full weight of urgency pressing on him. Every decision from this point forward could determine the outcome, could protect or endanger the person in the corner. The mare shifted again, nostrils flaring, ears forward, reflecting the tension in the room, her instincts ready to guide them through whatever was coming. The intruder moved closer, stepping into the cabin, and the candlelight illuminated a figure tense with awareness, searching the room for the slightest hint of presence. The man's breath caught. This was it, the moment before confrontation, the edge of suspense where every heartbeat counted. The mare nickered softly, an almost imperceptible signal, and the figure in the corner clutched the blanket tighter, eyes wide with fear and hope. The room seemed suspended in time, shadows and light weaving a tense tapestry of anticipation, every second a countdown to the unknown. The tension is now at its peak, setting the stage for the climax. Every element, the intruder, the mare, the person in danger, and the man converges in this high-stakes moment without revealing the final outcome. The intruder froze in the doorway, the candlelight revealing a face twisted with frustration and fear. The man shifted slightly, letting the mare's steady presence serve as a silent warning. For a moment the room was frozen in time, each breath hanging in the air, heavy with tension. Then the mare snorted softly, a warning, and the intruder's hand twitched toward what looked like a weapon. The man reacted instinctively, stepping slightly forward, keeping his voice calm but firm. "Stop. There's no need for more danger tonight." The words seemed to pierce the intruder's focus. They hesitated, caught off guard by the man's courage and the unexpected authority of the mare. The person in the corner clutched the blanket tighter, eyes wide, waiting to see how this confrontation would unfold. The intruder's shoulders slumped slightly, a silent acknowledgement that their control over the situation was slipping. The man stayed still, showing no aggression, letting the intruder weigh the choice, act violently or step back. Finally, the intruder lowered the hand that had hovered near a weapon, taking a slow, measured step backward. I didn't expect anyone to be here," they muttered, voice tight. The man nodded, keeping his tone calm. "Neither did I, but I'm here now, and I suggest we end this without more harm. There's been enough fear already." The mare shifted slightly, nudging him lightly, her presence reminding both sides of the life at stake and the need for care. The intruder glanced around the small cabin, realizing the person in danger was still alive, safe for the moment. Panic and realization mixed on their face, a silent acknowledgement that their threat had been neutralized without a fight. The man stepped fully into the room now, careful but deliberate. "You need to leave," he said, voice steady. "Now. Go back into the night and make sure no one else gets caught in this." The intruder hesitated one last time, then turned and slipped into the shadows outside, disappearing into the night, leaving only the faint sound of wind through the trees. The tension in the cabin slowly began to dissipate. The person in the corner slumped forward, relief flooding their features. The man moved closer, kneeling beside them and checking for any signs of injury. "You're safe now," he said softly. "The danger is gone, at least for tonight. We need to stay cautious, but you're alive." The mare shifted her weight, nuzzling the person gently, as if acknowledging their survival and offering quiet reassurance. There was a moment of stillness, a pause to catch their breath, and the relief was almost tangible. Once the immediate threat had passed, the man took time to examine the mare, checking for signs of strain or injury. She had carried them through the darkness, through fear and tension, and now her breathing was steady but heavy. He patted her side, murmuring words of thanks. "You did more than I could have asked. You were the reason we made it through this." The mare flicked her ears, her calm gaze meeting his, as if understanding the compliment, the recognition of courage, and the shared struggle they had endured. The person in the corner, still wrapped in the thin blanket, looked up at the man with gratitude. I don't know how to thank you," they said. I thought no one would come, that I would be left here alone." The man shook his head gently. "It wasn't luck, the note, the mara, everything led us here. You survived because someone cared enough to warn me, and because you trusted that help would arrive." The mare shifted slightly, pressing closer, reinforcing the connection between them all, a living symbol of trust and guidance. After a few minutes, the man helped the person to their feet. They stumbled slightly, weakened by fear and exhaustion, but the man guided them toward the door. Outside, the night was quieter now, the wind gentle, the threat gone, yet the forest still held shadows and unknown corners. He kept a hand on the mare's reins, leading both the horse and the person away from the cabin, back toward safer ground. Each step was deliberate, careful, ensuring they remained out of sight and safe from lingering danger. As they walked, the person began to speak, recounting more of the events that had led to their peril. The man listened quietly, understanding more of the motives and circumstances, realizing that the warning in the quilt had been urgent and precise. The story of abandonment, danger, and resilience unfolded, revealing not only the threat they have faced, but also the courage required to survive it. The mare's steady gait seemed to carry them further from fear, each step reinforcing the sense of protection and guidance she had provided. By the time they reached a small clearing with enough light to rest safely, the man let them settle against a tree, the mare grazing quietly nearby. The tension of the night began to ebb, replaced by cautious relief. "You'll need rest," he said gently. "The danger is behind us, and we have a chance to regroup. Tomorrow, we can find a safer place and figure out what comes next." The person nodded, gratitude and exhaustion mingling on their face. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "Or her," they said, gesturing toward the mare. The man smiled faintly, brushing a hand across the mare's neck. "She's more than a horse. She's a guide, a protector. And tonight, she saved both our lives in ways that words can't capture." The mare flicked her ears and nudged him softly, as if acknowledging the praise. The night, once fraught with tension and uncertainty, now held a fragile peace, a quiet affirmation that courage, trust, and connection had prevailed. The first hints of dawn began to lighten the edges of the sky, casting soft hues over the forest. The man helped the person to stand fully, supporting them as they stretched and shook off the weariness of fear. "The road ahead won't be easy," he said. "But you survived the worst. That's the first step. The rest. We'll face together." The mare shifted, stamping her hooves lightly, ready to move again, a silent promise that their journey forward would not be taken alone. As they made their way through the thinning trees, the man reflected on the night's events. The abandoned mare, the cryptic note, the danger, and the intruder had all woven together a story of warning, survival, and resilience. Each moment had tested courage and patience, and the lessons were clear. Vigilance, trust, and compassion could change the outcome even in the darkest moments. The mare had been more than an animal. She had been a catalyst, a guide, a living embodiment of courage and instinct. By the time they reached a safer clearing, the morning light had spread fully across the land, bathing the forest in a gentle warmth. The person in danger took a deep breath, finally allowing themselves to relax. "I thought I would never make it through the night," they admitted softly. The man shook his head gently. "You made it. And you learned that help can arrive when least expected, often through the quietest and most unlikely guides." The mare grazed nearby, calm, having fulfilled her role, yet still watchful, ever protective. The story of that night would linger in memory for all three of them: the man, the person he saved, and the mare who had guided them through danger. Lessons were learned about courage, the power of intuition, and the unspoken bond between human and animal. The quilt, once a symbol of warning and abandonment, now carried a story of hope, action, and survival. The forest, which had seemed threatening and uncertain, had become a witness to bravery, a silent testament to the strength of trust and compassion. As the sun rose fully, casting golden light across the trees, the man and the person began to make plans for the next steps, knowing that their lives had been changed forever by the events of the night. The mare followed, her steps calm and assured, a living reminder that guidance, loyalty, and courage could be found in the most unexpected companions. The danger had passed, but the lessons endured, leaving an impression that neither time nor circumstance could erase. They moved forward together, stronger for what had happened, aware of the fragility of life and the power of trust. The forest, once a place of shadows and uncertainty, now held a quiet serenity, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. And though the night had brought fear, it had also revealed bravery, resilience, and the extraordinary bond between humans and the animals that guide them. In the end, the mare returned to her gentle grazing. The person rested, and the man reflected on how a single act of care finding an abandoned horse and following its instincts could change the course of events in ways unimaginable. The danger had been real, the suspense intense, and yet the resolution brought not just safety, but clarity and understanding. Every fear, every shadow, every heartbeat of suspense had led to this moment of quiet triumph, leaving behind lessons that would not be forgotten. The forest whispered in the morning light, and the three of them moved forward together, carrying the story of courage, survival, and unexpected guidance into a future that promised hope, resilience, and a deeper appreciation for the bonds that tie the world together. The story concludes naturally, tying together suspense, danger, and resolution, while emphasizing the human-animal connection, courage, and trust, leaving readers with a memorable and reflective ending.